Okay, so we have the function f of x equals sine x plus cosine x, and we need to make a sketch. So you need, again, x and y intercepts, the extrema, first derivative, and then if it's concave up or concave down, second derivative. And then also you need the points. So let's go ahead, let's get this going. So let's find x-intercepts. Let's change my color. So f of 0, I'm making my x value 0, so I'm finding my y-intercept here. Now, as a quick review, go to the angle 0 in the trig circle. Sine of 0 is 0. Cosine of 0 is 1. So we have 0 plus 1. Therefore, f of 0 equals 1. We have the y-intercept of 0, 1. Now, let's go ahead and find our x-intercept by making f of x equal to 0, and then we solve for x. So sine x plus cosine x, when does that equal 0? When sine x, I subtract cosine x from both sides. So go back to your unit circle again, and look, when are sine x and cosine x opposites? I believe right here, and then right there. So what x values are those? 7 pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4. So x equals 3 pi over 4, or x equals 7 pi over 4. Now again, this represents my intercepts. So I got 0, 1, then I have 3 pi over 4, comma 0, and then I have 7 pi over 4, comma 0. So these are my intercepts that I need. All right, so first big information down. Now we must find the extrema. Let's go ahead and continue. We must take the derivative. And we get cosine x minus sine x. Go ahead and solve for 0. Solve for x, I mean. Then we get cosine of x equals sine x. So when is cosine x equal to sine x? For what values of x is this true? Let's go back here. They are equal here and here. So 5 pi over 4 and pi over 4. That's my two x values. Pi over 4 or 5 pi over 4. Now, because you're curve sketching, you must find the y value here as well. So we found the x value. So now we got to go to the original function and find the y value. So f of pi over 4 equals cosine pi over 4 plus sine pi over 4, which is root 2 over 2, plus root 2 over 2, which is root 2, which is about 1.4 something. Okay. And then the same thing now. F of 5 pi over 4, which is cosine 5 pi over 4 plus sine 5 pi over 4. So what does that turn out to be? Negative root 2. Negative 1.4. So when you graph the minimums max, you'll know what's going on now. You'll know exactly the point. Now let's go ahead and do the sign test. So we got pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, ugly. Okay, a little bit better, not much, I know. So 5 pi over 4. Now let's go ahead and try and find the positivity, the signage of the interval in here. So pi over 4 to 5 pi over 4. Pi over 4 to 5 pi. So anywhere within this interval here, I'm going to go ahead and choose pi. It's the easiest to do. So now you go to this function here, you do the sign test. Cosine of pi minus sine of pi. Cosine of pi is negative 1 minus 0. So the interval here is negative. All right. So again, what I did was f derivative of pi, and that turns out to be negative. So that means negative, this is 0, so that means this is positive, and this is positive then out here as well. All right, so this is telling me the graph is increasing here, decreasing here, increasing. Let's jump to the second derivative. So f double derivative of x is derivative of cosine x, sine x, but negative sine x. And then we have minus cosine of x. Go ahead and factor out a negative 1, and we're left with sine x plus cosine x. Set it equal to 0. Yeah, you can divide by negative 1, and you're left with sine x plus cosine x equals 0. Go ahead and ask yourself the same question. When does sine x equal negative cosine x? Well, we did that. We already did that when we did that here. So 3 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. Don't sit there and keep doing the same work. 3 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. Let's test again for pi. You know, like the sine. Let's find the sine value in between this interval. So f derivative, double derivative of pi equals negative sine pi is 0 minus negative cosine pi is minus negative 1. So it's positive here. So this is positive, this is negative, this is negative. Concave up, concave down, concave down. Now it's time to put it all together, but there's one more thing. We need to find what is f of 3 pi over 4. What's that equal to? And f of 7 pi over 4. Sine 3 pi over 4 plus cosine of 3 pi over 4 is, sine of 3 pi over 4 is, again, root 2 over 2 plus negative root 2 over 2. Hey, that's 0. And guess what? 7 pi over 4, you can test for yourself. That's also 0 as well. So now we put it all together. Okay, so just to help out with this example, I'm going to write everything in one place. So I'm going to write my intercepts. Here are my intercepts, 0, 1, 3 pi over 4, 0, and finally 7 pi over 4, 0. Then I'm going to write my extrema. So we got pi over 4, comma, root 2. And then we got 5 pi over 4, comma, negative root 2. And then finally I'm going to write my points of inflection, which is, I forgot now, 3 pi over 4, 0, comma, 7 pi over 4, 0. And now it's graphing time. Oh, that was not nice. Let's get the graph going. I'll pause it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the graphs. I kind of organize things a little bit more. So we have our intercepts, our extrema, and our points of inflection. Now, it seems like they said the graph goes from 0 to 2 pi. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start from 0, which will be here. This is 0. And let's say every 2 spaces is pi over 4. So let's just go by pi over 4. Then we got pi over 2. And then we have 3 pi over 4. And then we have 4 pi over 4, which is pi, which is fine. We just keep writing it like this. And then we keep going up. 5 pi over 4. And then we have 6 pi over 4. Then 7 pi over 4. And then finally 2 pi, which is 8 pi over 4, right? Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and graph my intercepts. Start with the intercepts first. So we have 0, and let's go ahead and make this my 1. I have another 0 at 3 pi over 4, and then I have another 0 at 7 pi over 4. There we go. I fixed it now to 7 pi over 4. Okay, now let's go ahead and graph our extrema. So pi over 4, square root of 2. So pi over 4 is here. Now square root of 2 is a little bit more than 1. It's about 1.4, so let's do that here. Now, yes, that's definitely going to be a max, because, I mean, obviously 3 pi over 4 is less. So we have pi over 4 square root of 2, and then 5 pi over 4 negative square root of 2. So we'll do the same thing, and we'll put our other point right here, 5 pi over 4 negative square root of 2. Okay, that's our extrema. Then our points of inflection turn out to be also our zeros. So 3 pi over 4, 0, that's my point of inflection right here. So that's where the graph changes concavity. And then 7 pi over 4 again, right over there at the other point of 0. Okay, now all you have to do is just start a smooth sketch. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get it going. So that's the max, and it starts to go down. And now this is changing concavity, so this is concave down. And then we start going, it changes to concave up. And it's still going concave up. And the graph keeps going. And that's it. All right, that's all.